Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maribel Feliciano. I'm the director with the Broward County Office of Economic and Small Business Development, and we would like to welcome all of you to our Florida Unified Certification Program webinar. As you are aware, the USDOT regulations issued on October 3rd of 2025 require that all currently certified DBEs and ACDBE firms undergo a re-evaluation process that focuses on demonstrating the social disadvantage for majority owners of these firms. Today, you're going to have an interactive training session that's going to review the details of these new requirements, different scenarios on how to craft your personal narrative, and procedures for completing and submitting your personal narrative. This section is going to be interactive. At the end of the training session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. We would like to encourage all of you to type the questions under the Q&A tab as part of the webinar. And we're going to take all your questions at the end of the presentation. Again, welcome. It is a priority for us here in Broward County Office of Economic and Small Business Development to make sure our certified firms are aware of the procedures that have changed, and also to work with you to prepare you for that recertification process. And for that, we are very fortunate that we have brought to you today a national expert in this area. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the presenter for today, Denise Bailey with Bailey White Solutions. Welcome, Denise.
Denise, you're muted.
Yeah, Denise.
I've got too much going on here. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be here today, and thanks to Broward County and all their partners at the UCP for bringing us here. We're going to start after our welcoming, which we just had, talking about the Unified Certification Program, the reevaluation requirements. We'll have a session for questions and answers, and then we'll have a wrap up. So getting first into the overview of the Unified Certification Program at Florida. So the Florida UCP has 9 certifying members, quite a large group of certifiers. This is unique as we go from state to state. So each state has their own UCP or Unified Certification Program. In fact, these have been in place since 2002. They have become in the spotlight, though, as part of the reevaluation. So UCPs make the certification decisions for all recipients within a state. So every state DOT, transit entity, and airport within a state all fall under one UCP, and all the certification decisions for Disadvantaged Business Enterprise or DBEs and Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise or ACDBEs are made by the UCP. Many states have more than one entity that certify within their arena. And as you can imagine, with 9 certifiers, they are really doing their due diligence in Florida to make sure that they get everything right. Additionally, each DBE has what is called their home state UCP. Typically, that is where you have your principal place of business. And so I am assuming that the majority of folks on the line today are Florida-based firms, and the Florida UCP is your home state, also known as jurisdiction of original certification. So let's talk about the reevaluation requirements that Maribel started us off with. In October the 3rd, there was an interim final rule issued for the current DBE and ACDBE regulations. So the ACDBE regulation is 49 CFR Part 23, and Part 26 is the DBE regulation. Then on October the 24th, the DOT issued some FAQs, or frequently asked questions. In addition, on December the 1st, there were more FAQs that were issued. There are not two separate documents now, so you can get one document that has all the FAQs. If you click on this link, you should see the document that has the updated FAQs that encompass both the October 24th and the December 1st versions. USDOT also did put out a notification that they were hosting a spotlight webinar for their own business opportunities for small businesses this Wednesday. It's not clear, and the IFR is not part of what is on the agenda, but just in general, we thought it would be good to know that USDOT is doing a spotlight webinar, so you may want to sign up for that. We have a QR code there, and if that doesn't work for you, we can also get you the actual URL in case you would like to register for that. So a lot happened between the beginning of October and the beginning of December. So we're going to try to, first of all, bring everyone up to the same level of understanding about the DBE regulation. First, in order to be a DBE, and this has not changed since the regulations first came out in 1999, at least 51% of that firm has to be owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged owners. We call them CEDOs. So if you're a pretty streamlined organization and you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, you may only have one owner in your firm. Then that owner is the only CEDO. If, however, you have more than one owner in your firm, you have to make sure that at least 51% of the ownership is by CEDOs. So the example we give is if there are 4 partners in a firm and everyone has 25% shares, in order to get up to at least 51% ownership by CEDOs, 3 members have to be socially and economically disadvantaged. This becomes very important for reevaluation because it will determine how many owners in your company will have to provide a personal narrative and an updated personal net worth. So keep in mind the issue of how many folks from my company may have to actually produce something for this process. This requirement that at least 51% be owned and controlled by CEDOs is only one of the requirements for certification, but currently certified DBEs and ACDBEs have already addressed the other issues because they are currently certified. So the new interim final rule makes changes primarily to the social disadvantage side of socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So before the interim final rule, which is what we call the IFR now, a new acronym for everyone, there were really 2 ways to demonstrate that as an individual, you were socially disadvantaged. One way was to be part of a group that was rebuttably presumed to be socially disadvantaged. Those groups, as you may recall from the original certification form, included Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, subcontinent Asian Americans, and women. So one way to demonstrate that you were socially disadvantaged was to be, as an individual, a member of one of those groups. There was always this OR pathway for someone who wasn't a member of those groups, and that was by providing a personal narrative demonstrating your experiences and how you were socially disadvantaged. And so writing a personal narrative isn't completely new to the regulation. It has become more prominent now, and they have changed the requirements within the personal narrative. So these were your 2 paths prior to October 3rd when the IFR came out. Now, the rebuttable presumption of social disadvantage has been removed. So the eligibility of all currently certified DBEs and ACDBEs must be reevaluated. And they inserted a new section of the regulation 26.111 to give instructions to certifiers on how they were to go about that process. And so now all CEDOs, as we call them, the socially and economically disadvantaged owners, need to submit and demonstrate their social disadvantage through a personal narrative. So we'll talk a little more about that. Just some overarching ideas that you need to come to grips with for this reevaluation is that there are two pieces. We show it down here in the box. You have the personal narrative, but you also need to submit an updated current personal net worth. Some key notes that the interim final rule talks about for your personal narrative. First of all, you cannot base your social disadvantage in whole or in part on race or sex. And so that is something to keep in mind as you're crafting personal narratives. Your disadvantage must be based in your individual experiences and circumstances within American society, and simply being born in another country doesn't standing alone automatically mean that you're necessarily socially and economically disadvantaged. For economic disadvantage, the E part of CEDO, each CEDO must provide a current personal net worth statement to support their economic disadvantage. And so we're going to unpack both sides of that, the personal narrative side, and just give you some tips on the personal net worth, since we know that not everyone has done one of these recently. So personal narratives, or as we've made the acronym, as the IFR did, the PNs. 26.67 is the revised part of the regulation that discusses how you need to demonstrate social disadvantage. It is a very small but very dense and now incredibly important part of the regulation. The most of that part of the regulation appears here on the screen. But because it is so dense, we have broken it out into its elements to help you better understand. So in your personal narrative, you need to provide specific instances of you as an individual experiencing economic hardship, systemic barriers, or denied opportunities, and then discuss how those instances impeded your progress or success in education, employment, or business. And then how did those impediments cause the owner economic harm? And so all this is on the right-hand side of the screen is a dissected version of that very dense paragraph. I'm a visual learner, and so we've also broken this apart into what we hope are more easily digestible chunks. And we've also pulled in some of the pertinent frequently asked questions that USDOT issued in either the October 24th or the December 1st version of the FAQs. So first, let's talk about specific instances. So remember, this is your personal narrative. So as an individual, not necessarily your firm, but as an individual, do you have any specific instances of economic hardship, systemic barriers, or denied opportunities? So let's talk about what some of those may be. Did you experience economic hardship in your life? Have you been experienced or been prevented from opportunities because of systemic barriers? And have you been denied opportunities as an individual? Two important FAQs. First of all, you don't have to hit every box. So you may only have instances of economic hardship or one of these three. Another important piece of information issued in December was that there is no requirement about when in your life these instances may have happened. They could be from a far time ago, or they could be more recently. For instance, if you grew up in extreme poverty, that could be when you had the instances of economic hardship, although you could have had a life event that plunged you into economic hardship. Systemic barriers. Sometimes we hear folks talk about growing up in an area where you had underperforming or underfunded schools and how that was an instance that then further impeded you, or denied opportunities. We've heard folks tell stories of they had to forego going to high school because they had to help raise their younger siblings. And so that denied them the opportunity of attending a school, even if it was a great school. And so you need to think back in your memory, far distant memory or more recent memory, on instances of economic hardship, systemic barriers, or denied opportunities. And then what you need to do is connect them to how did these specific instances on the previous slide impede your progress or success in education, employment, or business. Important notes to make here. It does not mean that today you might, or in the future, you might not have achieved some success. It doesn't mean that you were never successful, but was your progress or your success impeded in any of these three areas? And then once you make the connection between these impediments and those instances, how then do you classify them? So let's look at some helpful information that USDOT provided in their December FAQs. They really dug in and helped you further understand what type of factors they may be looking for when it comes to the impediments of education. So denial of equal access to higher education, exclusion from professional associations. It gives you more clues when it talks about employments, unequal treatment in hiring, promotions, and other advancements, and in business, such as unequal access to credit or capital. And so even reading these further descriptions that USDOT provided in their December 1st FAQs may give you more information to go back in your memory and help make those connections about why you may have been socially disadvantaged. And then how did these impediments cause economic harm? And the regulations talk about describing the type and magnitude of economic harm. It doesn't say that you have to fix a dollar amount to it. Think more type and magnitude. So those are the building blocks. But if we go back and try to put them all together, think about how specific instances of economic hardship, systemic barriers, denied opportunities, how did these lead to impediments in education, employment, and business? And then how did those impediments lead to economic harm? It really is making the connections between each of the three pieces that are listed in the regulation itself that may help you craft better and more rich personal narratives to more fully explain your economic harm and your social disadvantage. So if we think about, and by no means am I saying these are examples or ones you should use or will be completely accepted by your certifiers, but let's say that you grew up in abject poverty. That impeded your progress or success in education. And so maybe you had to get scholarships. Maybe it took you longer to either attend a four-year college or graduate from that. And that led to perhaps you not being able to start your business until later in life. There is a magnitude of economic difference between someone that may have been able to start a business earlier in their lives, in their 20s or 30s, or those who had to wait until they were in their 50s and had gotten enough experience, but also, as importantly, economic stability and capital assets in order to start and run an effective business. And so think about making these types of connections. If you, for a systemic barrier, grew up in an area that had no industrialized base and very little prospects for good paying jobs, and you didn't have economic mobility, that systemic barrier may have led to an impediment in employment, which then could have led you not to have the skills and the ability to understand how to run a business, to start a business, and perhaps that's the economic harm. The difference in the ability to get lending capital and credit also is one that definitely has a throughput in a lot of personal narratives. Importantly, when I've described these sample scenarios, not once did I talk about what my race or my sex was. And so it's important for you to try to make sure that you are basing this on your social disadvantage, absent and not in whole or in part by your race or sex. And so it may take just a little more, digging into your past or your memory to be able to pull forward things that would be natural impediments without relying in whole or in part on your race or sex. So, what's some more information about the personal narratives? Neither the interim final rule nor the FAQs include any required attachments or fact. In fact, I think anyone who maybe has gone into a bank to perhaps get a business loan will know that oftentimes if you're not going to qualify, you are stopped before you even apply. The banker may look at it and say, I don't really have any vehicles based on what you're telling me that we could offer you for any financial support. And so it's not a requirement that you have rejection letters. Certainly, if you have them, they make your personal narrative stronger, but there's nothing in the IFR or the FAQs that currently say there's any required attachments or data like that have to be there. However, the more specific you can be, if you have dates, people, instances, or any economic or financial information to support your personal narrative, that will make the reevaluation process smoother for you and for your evaluators. Relevant information may be considered, but the incidents or experiences discussed in the narrative must not rely in whole or in part on race or sex. This came out in question C10 in the FAQs. Before that question came out, the IFR said that the certifier's determinations can't be based in whole or in part by your race or sex. But this FAQ seems to point it also on what's in your personal narrative. So the best way to make sure that it's not being part of the determination is to not include it unless you absolutely have to in your personal narrative. So importantly, the personal narrative needs to focus on personal disadvantage and not group-based discrimination. And so you need to, oftentimes these two words were used almost interchangeably, disadvantage and discrimination, but they're very different, and especially for this exercise, should be really leaning into disadvantage and away from using discrimination. So personal narratives must describe the existence of disadvantage by a preponderance of the evidence. So what is the burden of proof for evaluating personal narratives from the reviewer's seat? So a preponderance of the evidence means that it's more likely than not, and that's how it's described in the regulation. It's not, another burden of evidence, which is beyond a shadow of a doubt. It more likely than not that you are socially disadvantaged. And importantly, after certifiers consider all the information viewed as a whole. So that also tells me that if you have multiple incidences and multiple impediments, put them all in to your personal narrative so that you are able to express to them the entire package, so that even if one of your instances may not be the one that's carrying the day, you have other information in there that may help you as well. The IFR estimated that on average, it would take firms 20 hours to comply with the certification evaluation, and certifiers would spend approximately 2 hours evaluating the submissions. And so that gives you a couple of hallmarks to go by. First of all, this is not the great American novel. Most agencies will give you instructions of between 2 and 3 pages, but it is going to take you some time to develop that personal narrative and the personal net worth statement. So personal net worth statements. I know that this has always been a requirement since 1999, but many DBEs and ACDBEs have not, in fact, done a personal net worth statement in a couple of years. So importantly, in 2024, the DBE and ACDBE regulations got a big facelift. And one of the things they did was modify the personal net worth statement. And so if you haven't done a personal net worth statement in a while, make sure that you're aware of the current form that's on DOT's website. And also, don't underestimate the time that it may be needed to complete these forms. Importantly, read the instructions on the personal net worth statement. Your personal net worth includes assets and liabilities that you own or are deemed to own without regard to community property states. And so this is not your business's net worth statement. This is the individual CEDO's personal net worth statement. And so the instructions say that if you own assets jointly, then you need to split up how much of that is actually yours. For instance, if I own an investment property and I'm married and I'm a joint owner on that, I only pick up half of that asset as an asset, the equity as an asset, and half of the mortgage as a liability. And so you need to make sure that you're keeping it all straight on these firms, because it is your personal net worth, not your family net worth, that is going on this form. Assets should be at their current market value. And so if you haven't done your personal net worth in a while, you may have to look for a source to value some of those assets. And this, again, is not the applicant firm's value. This is the individual's value. This sometimes gets a little difficult for sole proprietors in splitting up what is the business asset versus the personal asset of the owner. So the first sheet you see is a summary sheet. And as you notice, there are worksheets that go along with each of the 12 lines on this form. Importantly, your personal net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. It's not your income. It's not your draw or your salary. It's the value of your assets minus the value of your liabilities. Please, for your certifier's sake, make sure you don't skip putting the date up at the top in the as of date, so that they can always demonstrate that this is a current personal net worth, because that is the requirement. I always say it's important to do all these separate worksheets that are noted first and that are part of the rest of the personal net worth statement, because this should be the summary. And so the number here should match the associated number, that's the total on the worksheet in the subsequent places. So please also double check your math before you submit it, because the two highest reasons that certifiers say that personal net worth statements are rejected, they're not dated and the numbers don't match. And so maybe spend some time doing it. And as I said, go in a cold, dark room and review your personal net worth outside the heat of actually compiling it. So a couple of important notes to mention about the personal net worth. Your personal net worth has to be below $2.047 million. But for the asset side, there are some important exclusions. You exclude your ownership equity in the applicant firm. You exclude your share of the equity in your primary residence. However, you still provide information about it in worksheet 14. And new in 2024, you exclude your retirement assets, although you do give information about it in worksheet 13. So those are two worksheets that are informational in this package that don't flow forward into the assets or the liabilities on the summary sheet. And so this is just a listing of what's on the summary sheet for everything that you have to compile for your assets: cash and cash equivalents, investment accounts, value of your ownership in other real estate other than your primary residence, personal property, ownership in other businesses, life insurance, if you have whole or annuity life insurance, the face value, amounts owed to you, assets held in trust, and assets you transferred to somebody in the past 2 years. For liabilities, there are only a couple of lines. So first of all, make sure these are the current balances, the outstanding balances on these liabilities. You do not include contingent liabilities. So contingent liabilities aren't a liability until the contingent thing happens. For instance, if you are the defendant in a lawsuit that has a financial aspect to it, and let's just say you've been sued for $100,000, you can't include $100,000 as a liability because that's contingent of you being found guilty and that judgment being lodged against you. And so that's an example of a contingent liability. You also don't report as a liability business debt, debt secured by retirement assets, or any amount you owe directly or indirectly to the applicant firm or a DBE itself. So those are the things that you have to produce and start to be ready to submit. Personal narrative. So there's some thinking and some writing to do there. Personal net worth. There's some updating of financial information to do there. But while you're doing that, the UCPs across the country, and especially in Florida, have been very busy. So first of all, there was a clarification that you should only be sending personal narratives and personal net worth statement to your home state or your jurisdiction of original certification. And so you go through that process with your home state. This also eliminated some work of UCPs that perhaps were staring at a lot more folks to reevaluate, but they're only focused on the firms in there that have principal offices in their states. They are making the reevaluations as listed in the IFR as quickly as practicable and promptly notifying USDOT when they're finished. And so Florida has to reevaluate all the DBEs that are located in Florida. And when they're done, they have to notify USDOT. They need to make a written decision to each currently certified ACDBE stating whether they are recertified or decertified. You still, as a firm, have a right to appeal if you become decertified under this process. And the UCPs can't just decertify everyone without conducting a evaluation. And so a lot of important information in there. And the reason that the UCP is being so diligent in making sure they have all the steps correct is not just so they only have to come to you once to ask for your information, but also because they know that their entire process can be reviewed by USDOT. Important information about deadlines. 26.111, which is the reevaluation process part of the regulation, does not establish a deadline by which the UCP has to complete reevaluating their DBEs. One of the concerns and the reason they put FAQ C13 out was that because there was no deadline, some UCPs were concerned about how long it may take them to tell USDOT that they were complete with their reevaluation. And so not having a deadline created an issue for the UCPs maybe never getting done. So to address this, the DOT said that UCPs can set a date by which you need to submit your reevaluations. And so that allows them to say that they have completed the process. So if DBEs don't submit the information by the required date, they could still submit it at a later time, but until they actually go through the process, they are really not allowed to be named or counted towards any projects, even if the state is done and certain recipients are going back to goal setting. And so it's important to listen to the deadlines of your UCP. So interstate certifications, we know that many DBEs and ACDBEs are not only certified in their home state, but they're certified in other states, AKA interstate certification. Once you get reevaluated by your home state, then you will use the same process you used before to get interstate certified. And so you will have to go through that process again to be listed on any other state's directory. They're going to be looking to see that you passed reevaluation at home before they will put you on their state's directory. There's also a question about anniversary date that they answered in FAQ C12. All DBEs and ACDBEs have an anniversary date from their original certification. That's the date historically you would send in your annual declaration of eligibility. This reevaluation process is not going to change your date. So no, you're not going to get a new anniversary date. You will remain with whatever anniversary date you had before this reevaluation process. So what happens now? I call this recipient activities because a recipient would be Fort Lauderdale Airport's a recipient of USDOT funds, as is a number of transit agencies in the state, as is Florida DOT. And so any recipient of USDOT funds are actually prevented from doing some things until the reevaluation in your state is complete. And that is why what the UCP is doing is so important now. So they cannot set any DBE or ACDBE goals on upcoming opportunities until reevaluation has been completed for the whole state. If there were any projects that were out there advertised but hadn't been awarded prior to October 3rd, amendments had to be issued to remove the DBE or ACDBE goals from those advertised projects. Design, build, and open-ended projects, such and also including on-call and IDIQs. These are types of project deliveries and contracts where goals are established either with a task order or as phases rolled out. And so similar to the no goals being set now, on design build projects, none of the future phase goals can be set. And for on-calls, no task orders that are newly issued can include goals. And so there are a number of things that are on pause until the state completes the reevaluation process. And that's the entirety of the presentation. I believe now we have time for questions and answers, and I'm gonna draft back. So I'll take a crack at answering some of these. I'm gonna start with the first one. What benefit will this certification provide is the first question. It is the same benefits that it's always provided, which is one way to help level the playing field. And so there are other benefits that come along quite often with DBE certification, especially in light of if they set goals for it. But a number of other agencies may be accepting DBE certification in order to name you as a different type of business. Cheryl, any additional answers for that?
Well, I think what they're getting at is whether or not there will be DBE and ACDBE goals on projects in the future. Because right now, because of the nature of it being on hold, there are no projects with DBE, ACDBE goals currently. So once we get through the reevaluation process and the state of Florida lets the USDOT know that we've completed all reevaluations, then at that point, we may be able to start setting goal DBE and ACDBE goals on projects. But until that happens, the DBE right now is still on hold. And that's why we're starting with our currently certified firms. We're not accepting any new applications now until we get through this reevaluation process. Because currently the DBE, ACDBE, is really right now on hold. So if that's where you were going with that question, what is the benefit at this point? The benefit would be once we start setting goals, then those projects that get let out with DBE goals need DBE participation. So hopefully that answered your question.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. There is a question about, are there any matchmaking events or other opportunities to meet agency buyers?
Yes, and I can take that question. Yes, we do host matchmaking events. Actually, a few weeks ago, we had our Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport Industry Day that was hosted by the airport and their team from the airport. We will continue to collaborate with our agencies, with the airport, our transportation department. They also hosted another industry day, our transportation department, a few weeks ago. We will continue to host these industry days as we have projects coming up. We have a lot of projects that are coming up at the airport and as part of our transportation department. So we encourage all our current certified firms to please visit our website for information on upcoming events and to follow us on social media, because we are on a weekly basis sharing information related to upcoming events. We're also recording these industry days, and for example, the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Expo Industry Day, we have on YouTube some of the projects, the slide presentations, etc. So if you missed the event, you can still have access to a lot of the information.
Great, and I know that for many agencies, and Florida has a lot of DOT recipients, transit, highway, and airport, that the work hasn't stopped. So there's still a need to get work done at each of these agencies. There is a question about when Florida will start reviewing the applications. I know the reason that they're not accepting yet is they're trying to make sure that everything's secure. But I think either Cheryl or Maribel, any answers to that?
Yes, we're going to start in January. We're going to be sharing additional information with all our DBEs and ACDBEs as we are finalizing the process, the recertification process. We're working with all the other certifying entities in the state to finalize that recertification process and the procedures you will have to follow. So we hope to have additional information for you in January. So definitely stay tuned, because we'll be emailing all our currently certified DBEs and ACDBEs additional information as soon as those processes are finalized.
Great. And the DBE certification is for all agencies, with all DOT receiving agencies in Florida, not just Florida DOT. There is a question about a CBS certification. Is that something different, Cheryl or Maribel?
I think that person needs to say what CBS is. I think they may be talking about the CBE, which is a local certification, but I'm not sure. I saw that too. But I'm
Got
not
it.
sure what
Yes.
CBS
Yeah.
is.
That's what she meant, the CBE program. Our local program continues. So if you're a CBE or an SBE under our local certification program, that's CBE County Business Enterprise or SBE Small Business Enterprise. That's our Broward County local certification program, which is race and gender neutral. The program continues business as usual. There have not been any changes to the local program.
Thanks, Maribel. And there was a question about what's UCP stand for, that's Unified Certification Program. There's a question about how long it will take agencies to establish new goals. We know that they can't be even begun to be established until Florida redoes the does all the reevaluations. And so that will really be an agency by agency decision once the reevaluation is completed. I think we answered the question about the standard state deadline. You're going to get that information when you start seeing the communications from the UCP in January. Am I correct? There's a question. Am I correct in understanding the deadline for recertification is, or anniversary date? Is there a particular deadline we should be aware of? So there are two kind of deadlines you're looking at now. The deadline that's coming up will be to provide your personal narrative and your personal net worth. That is the most important date that you're looking for right now so that you can remain a certified DBE or ACDBE. I don't believe that the Florida UCP charges anybody for certification or reevaluation, so there is no cost, correct, UCP
That's
members?
correct. There is no cost. The certification process, recertification process is free.
Got you. And there are questions about when the application's coming out, where the link is. You're going to get all of that information about sending in information in January from the UCP as their anticipated date.
Let me
And that's the
just add
same.
to that, Denise.
Mhm. Yes.
If you are talking about a brand new application, that not only is dependent on FDOT reporting to USDOT that we've completed the reevaluation process, but also USDOT, at least from my understanding, and Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, from my understanding is reevaluating that application itself. So there may be a new application on the USDOT's website that may be required as opposed to the one that's currently out there.
Right. And definitely what they said in their FAQ is that they were working on updating that application that is on their website. Primarily, it's going to take out that box of rebuttably presumed groups for you to check, because that will no longer be. And we're assuming giving you instructions on writing the personal narrative. There is a question about how do you start the reevaluation process if you're currently certified. We recommend that based on the information that was brought to you today, that you can start, at least jotting down and starting to craft your personal narrative. You can definitely get a jump on starting your personal net worth statement, but you won't be submitting any of that or finalizing any of that until you get the specific informations from the UCP. Maribel, you got some shout outs there.
There is a question on, I'm currently waiting on my renewal. So everything is on hold as it relates to our federal program. So if you're a DBE or an ACDBE, the program is currently on hold. So you're not going to receive any responses to your renewal at this time, because as you heard from Denise, we're going over that process right now. And you're going to receive additional information from us in January as it relates to the recertification process.
There was a question about you have a local office in Broward, but you're certified at Miami-Dade. Pretty much everything in the state now is following the same process, which that means that nobody is setting goals for DBE or ACDBE that receives transportation money. And everyone is going to be reevaluated that has their primary offices in this state, and that the UCP has really gotten together to make sure that it's a standardized process along the way. I'm reading the question that says, currently qualified firms that may exceed the number of SE disadvantaged firms currently UCB certified may exclude firms owned by firms not owned by the protected. How will Broward County determine the universe of DBEs given this shortcoming? So the general gist of that question is that the universe of DBEs is going to be known once reevaluation is done. I don't think anyone can predict how many firms, some firms may not opt to go through reevaluation, and it's not clear how many firms will get decertified because of this. So I think that's one that probably has to wait until the reevaluation is done to really know numbers. And then there's a question about how you find out about local program certifications.
You can go to our website, and I'm sure our team will type that on the chat. If you go to our website, broward.org/econdev, you go to the certification page, and you can get all the details related to our local certification program, and that includes the eligibility requirements, a very useful checklist of all the documents you need to submit. And we can even meet with you one-on-one if you have any questions to provide technical assistance, helping you with the understanding the documents that you need to submit as part of the application. So definitely you can also call us at 954-357-6400, and we'll be glad to provide assistance as it relates to the local certification application.
Yeah, and there are questions about if reevaluation excludes firms. There may be, I think USDOT anticipates that there may be some firms that won't qualify under this strictly social disadvantage process and the reevaluation process. And so that is, it is a fact that it's anticipated that perhaps not everyone will be recertified under this process, but the hope is that if you are socially disadvantaged, you'll be able to note that in your personal narrative, and the evaluators will be able to evaluate it correctly.
The next question is a really good question, Denise. Do we all need to apply in January when the application opens, or do we need to wait until the anniversary date? You can apply in January when we start the process. You don't have to wait to your anniversary date.
That's a great question. Thanks, Maribel.
Yeah, in fact, you should all do the reevaluation process in January when it opens, because the faster we get the whole state, and remember Broward County is just one of the 9 UCPs. So the whole state needs to do a reevaluation of their particular DBE firms, and then report that they've completed that to FDOT, so FDOT can report that to USDOT. So I know that's confusing, but you should not, once you hear from us that the reevaluation process is starting, and you should really start that right away, because the faster we get through it, the faster we can complete the reevaluation process.
And something else, thank you, Cheryl. Something else that we want to remind all our participants today is Broward County is migrating to a new business management system that is powered by B2G now, and that's going to be in January. So you're going to be using our new system to submit these documents. That is what we anticipate. So of course, we're going to share with all of you the details of all that information. We're also going to have training sessions in mid-January. We already hosted some training sessions in December. We're going to repeat those training sessions in January as it relates to how you need to use our new business management system to basically access information related to your contracts, getting certified, processing your renewals, submitting your utilization reports, payment verifications, etc. Definitely encourage all of you to follow up with our office if you have additional questions. Our YouTube channel has all the training sessions already posted. And this training session that you're participating in today, we're also going to post this on our YouTube channel. For those of you that maybe joined a few minutes later, I saw some comments on the chat. Yes, we are recording this training session and it's going to be available on our website.
Excellent.
Do we have additional questions?
Yeah, let me take the one from Wade White. So Wade, I think what you're asking, and I'm going to assume what you're saying about the reevaluation process, that does not exclude anyone. So anyone currently certified as a DBE needs to go through the reevaluation process. The new IFR does not have a quote unquote protected class anymore. That's the whole point of the reevaluation process. Their race and sex and national origin is no longer a, what's the word I'm looking for, Denise?
No longer rebuttably presumed to be socially
right.
disadvantaged.
Exactly. So everyone, regardless of how you got the DBE in the past, you need to go through the reevaluation, you need to do the personal narrative, and you need to do an updated P&W.
Thank you, Cheryl, for expanding on that. And then I think the last question we have here, I have an OESBD certification. How do I find out about the other ones you mentioned? I used to have the CBE, SBE, and you're currently certified under the DBE, ACDBE. So yes, if you go to the chat, you'll have the link to our local certification. If you used to be certified under the local CBE and SBE, but you're no longer certified and you would like to apply again for that certification, definitely encourage you to go to our website, which is on the chat, to have a link, go to the link to submit your new application for our local program. And this is the same question that we had previously. To be clear, the deadline for recertification, yeah, we already answered this question. And yes, we encourage all of you to submit the information for the recertification as soon as you get the information from us, which we anticipate is going to happen in January. You do not have to wait for your anniversary date to submit the documents that are required for the recertification. Okay, we have a very active audience. Thank you for these great questions. How long will it take for agencies to establish new DBE goals? Yeah, and we answered that previously. As soon as all the certifying entities recertify all the firms at the state, again, it's 9 of us, then that information is submitted by USDOT to the feds, and then that's when we can start assigning goals again. And is there a standard state deadline? No, there is no deadline at this time. We are going to be sharing information with all of you as soon as all of us, the 9 certifying entities, we're all working together to set up that process. It's going to be the same process for all of us. So we'll be sharing all the details of that process, how to submit the information, etc. There is no deadlines at this time.
And I don't think there's any system that currently has information that would help them with the personal narrative right now, correct?
We don't have, yes, right now on our website, if you go to our website, you'll have some general information about the federal requirements, the IFR, the requirements, etc. We do not have any application yet. We are working through that process right now with all the certifying entities at the state level. So definitely stay tuned for more information from our office. But as Denise indicated, the personal net worth that is available on the website, and you can start reviewing those forms because that form is already available. The actual certification application, the new certification application, as we share by Cheryl, is not ready yet. It's not available yet. So definitely stay tuned. And if you have any questions, I know we have shared a lot of information with you today. If you have additional questions, we encourage you to call us or email us here at the office, and we'll be glad to work with you, navigate, to help you understand the process and help you navigate these changes that are coming up.
And then you have a question about somebody that wants to switch who their certifying entity is from FDOT to Broward County, et cetera.
Cheryl, you want to expand on that? And again, I think we need to work with you as we are finalizing this process, and we'll provide more information because we really need to understand more details related to where you are located, etc. Right? So encourage you to call our office 954-357-6400 so we can better understand basically the details of your specific situation.
Yeah, because it understand that, the DBE process involved site visits. I don't think we're going to need to do site visits for reevaluations. However, your location is important in terms of which UCP would handle you. So if you were certified with FDOT, but you were, say, located in Tampa, then you would go through the Tampa UCP as opposed to us. So hopefully that gives you some clarification.
And then there's a question about the Florida goal reestablishment is not dependent on the other states. It goes state by state.
Exactly.
Well, again, thank you. Some excellent questions as part of today's session. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Denise, with any additional information we would like to share with our audience?
No, I think, hopefully this has been a great opportunity for maybe you to wrap your head around writing the personal narrative. It may have filled in some of the blanks on some of the words you've heard. But hopefully, I think the intent by Broward County and their team was to just give you some more insight and information so that over the holidays, you can really be crafting your personal narrative so that when they open it up in January, you will be more ready to roll.
Thank you, Denise. And we want to thank everybody that joined us today. We had an excellent audience, very engaging participants. We want to thank Denise for sharing her expertise with us today and for help facilitate this webinar today. Thank you, Cheryl, and the rest of the team, our communications team, for assisting with this webinar. And all this information is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Just want to highlight that OESBD is here to help you understand the process, help you understand the requirements, and definitely meet with you. If you have additional questions, call our office or email us. We'll be glad to provide assistance, technical assistance, as you are navigating this process. And also encourage all of you, if you haven't participated yet on our business management system, we're going live at the end of January. We definitely would like to welcome all of you to check out our YouTube channel to see all the training sessions, or join us in January, where we're going to be offering additional training for our new business management system that's going to be powered by B2G now. Again, thank you, everyone, and we hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.